Welcome to another edition of the Channel Zone podcast. Today, I have Glenn Graham with me. I'm going to start. I've got a little introduction I've written down that I'm going to refer to. Let me tell you a little bit about Glenn Graham. Glenn is a veteran of the IT channel ecosystem, having played a major part in our industry's growth and development. Through his career, he's served as a manager, channel leader and director in a number of companies, including industry legends such as P&P, Sun Microsystems and Symantec. Welcome, Glenn. Glenn and I both play the guitar and we are both music lovers. We've even bumped into each other at gigs. So I'm going to start, Glenn, by quoting some song lyrics as an entree into our conversation. I'm not sure that you'll get these lyrics, but let's give it a go. Tumble out of bed and stumble to the kitchen, pour myself a cup of ambition, and yawn and stretch and try to come to life. Jump in the shower and the blood starts pumping. Out on the streets, the traffic starts jumping for folks like me on the job from 9 to 5. Any guesses who that is, by the way?
No idea.
It is Dolly Parton, 9 to 5. And the reason I'm bringing it up, having looked at your LinkedIn profile, you once worked as a rep driving 60,000 miles a year, visiting customers and selling for a company called Rapid Recall. To kick us off, can you tell us a bit about your early life as a sales rep, as a salesperson, and the career route that you took as you progressed eventually into partner management and channel leadership?
As a late teen, early 20s, I worked at Warwick University as a technician, which actually, looking back on it now, was a great start because what it gave you was exposure to mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, glass blowing, you name it. And at some point towards the end of my tenure there, I was there for about 5 years, I went down to the glass blowing shop to meet one of the guys down there, and I was introduced to a guy, and the guy said, "Look, this is Glenn. This guy could sell oil to the Arabs," which I realised later that's probably not a good idea. And I ended up going for an interview as a salesperson for BDH, which was British Drug House, down in Paul in Dorset. Didn't get the job, but it sort of fired up an interest, which was maybe there's a life beyond being a lab technician. Mm. I then got another interview some months later, which I went to at the NEC. I had hair down to here in the days
Nice.
of hair, and I got the job. And it was working for a German company that made equipment for the semiconductor industry. It was the only company in Europe that could make this equipment. So when I say it was a sales job, it really wasn't a sales job. The customers had no choice. They had to buy it from us. What we made was tailor-made, and it was made specifically for their requirements. So my job was much more of a technician's job, really, in a sense.
And relationship as well, Glenn, I would have thought. Is it, man?
Well, yes, because what you end up doing is going to visit them, talking about what their requirements, taking them out for lunch, taking them bottles of German wine because it was a German company. And it was much more a social environment, in a sense. Did that for a year or so, got tugged by the competition, the inevitable situation which had happened early in my career, which was, you jump ship to go and get twice as much salary, and it turns out to be the biggest mistake you ever made, which it did. And I ended up then working for Rapid Recall, which to me I always look back on with huge fondness, and it was my first sales job. And go to the point you made earlier, 60 to 70,000 miles a year was because I covered the West Midlands and the South West. So I had customers in Goonhilly, down in the sort of bottom end of Cornwall, and right up to sort of North West Midlands. And customers ranging from GCHQ, RSRE, which I don't think exists anymore, Royal Signals and Radar Establishment.
Was that more sales than the previous role?
What Rapid Recall did at the time was sold semiconductors, literally little plug-in things that people would buy and use in their own equipment, or single-board computers, as they were called. And we also sold DEC equipment, Digital Equipment Corporation. And this was sold to end users. So I had customers ranging from sort of high-end military to commercial to manufacturing, etc.
But not a channel role yet, then.
No, absolutely just selling to end users. I did that
Mm.
successfully for 5 years at Rapid, and recognising that Rapid was an organisation that was quite unique in a sense because it attracted the right people by giving them the best cars they could afford to buy them. Which, looking back at it now, sounds quite strange, but clearly,
It was the big lure back then. I mean, I was even going to ask the question, what car did you have to do your 60,000 miles in? I can't, perhaps, I don't know if we can state clearly enough to younger generation salespeople, but the car was
yes.
hugely important.
Well, it's funny, we were talking about it just recently to somebody else, and my favourite one, the one that really worked well, was a Vauxhall Cavalier SRI.
Oh, SRI.
I know, so low-profile tyres, alloy wheels, bucket seats. I mean, it was just wonderful.
Was it white, red, blue, or black?
Red.
A red one.
Red with a vinyl roof.
Awesome.
Anyway, so about 86, Rapid Recall recognised at the time there was this growing organisations of small companies reselling Apple, Commodore, early IBM stuff into other organisations. So the world of PC was starting to rise.
Even Amstrad, maybe. I don't know. Did they sell it through?
No, Amstrad came later, I think.
Right.
But you're right. It certainly wasn't far behind. And what Rapid recognised was there was a whole set of products that we had within our portfolio that, quite honestly, could be sold to those organisations.
Wonderful.
So I was given my first management job. It was to set up an organisation, and it was called, get this, Rapid Winners. Wasn't my idea, but anyway. And we had a team of people that we took our products to the growing market. So computer centre.
So that's a transition point there. That is the transition for Rabbit, a transition from direct sales only, by the sounds of it, absolutely, into a realization that channel partners or value-added resellers out there might give them more exposure to a bigger market, and so that's the birth of the channel.
You're absolutely right. In a sense, what Rapid had been doing up until that point was, because we had our own stock. The way Intel worked, the way Intersil worked, and other semiconductor manufacturers, you bought their products and warehoused them, and then sold them on.
That's right.
So the act of a distributor, which then became something more common, going forward, didn't exist. So we had a distribution warehouse, effectively.
Yes.
So for us to go into a PC reseller market, as it became known, was relatively easy. We just found a new market and went and sold to it. It was interesting because it was organisations we'd never heard of. We were having to do, credit and chase debt and goodness knows what, all those different things that we weren't used to. So it was a bit of an experiment for the organisation, but it continued. It continued for me for about 2 years doing that, and I got the inevitable tap on the shoulder from what was P&P. And P&P is an interesting story that, and an even better example in a sense of what the industry was like back then. Because
what year are we talking? Is this late 80s, early 90s?
It is mid 80s.
Right. Okay.
I joined P&P in 86.
Wow.
P&P got its name from the husband and wife, as you may or may not know. Pete Fisher, Pam Fisher. Pete was a social worker. I think Pam was as well. They lived in Streatham in London, or St Wreatham. And because Pam was a Californian, when they went home to California, what they spotted was all this growing market for Apple software.
Yeah.
And of course, in those days, it was boxed. It was,
yes,
floppy disks and all that sort of stuff. And they used to bring home literally casefuls of product. knock together some small little pamphlets and sell it over the phone from their house. And that's how it started. When I joined in '86, it had moved back to where Pete came from, which was in Rosendale, up in Lancashire. They've got a massive warehouse and a whole team of people selling.
Mainly Apple.
Apple, IBM was starting to come, so it was the Microsoft products, and there was a whole range of hard drives and various add-ons that people would want to buy as resellers.
Glenn, did Computer Centre exist at that time, or who were the competition? So Computer Centre just started, probably. At that. Similarly, SCC maybe as well. Yes. I don't know whether SCC, they were around. Say PMP and then disappeared. Most of the people, my guess is, perhaps listening to this podcast won't even have heard of them. I don't know quite where they were acquired or how they disappeared, but they were certainly in the late 80s, early 90s. They were a major player, probably one of the UK's most successful resellers.
What happened was that Pete decided, along with Pam, I think, that first of all they were parting company, so the marriage had sort of dissolved. They decided to bring in an external organisation. It was one of the big accountants, and the guy they brought in ended up becoming managing director. He then recruited various people, one of which was me. We created a new board, and we then took it from what was still a sort of parochial organisation run by Pete and Pam, and turned it into a public company. We floated it on the stock exchange. My part of the business, was £100 million by the end of the 80s, basically.
And your part there was Channel
director. Yeah,
right. Fantastic.
99% of what we did was selling products to the channel.
Yeah.
1%, maybe 10%, depending on who you spoke to, we sold direct to end users.
So a distributor, it would perhaps be a better definition.
Fundamentally a distributor, but we clouded the issue, particularly with people like Computer Centre and SCC that you've already mentioned. We clouded the issue because we were selling to end users, so we would compete with them. So I do remember having a meeting with he wasn't a sir then, but Peter Rigby, now Sir Peter Rigby, where he gave me a right grilling because how could I sell to him as a distributor and at the same time be selling to his customers?
Yes,
you can't do both, he said, which is quite strange. It's exactly what he went on to do himself.
But the point from Peter Rigby there is he said those roles were actually being formed at that time, weren't they? I mean, there were no rules in some respects. Correct. It was developing. So it's extraordinary that you were there setting out the foundation stones, in my mind, as to what is today the channel infrastructure that is probably not just UK or Europe, but worldwide.
Yeah. It was pioneering, I suppose, in a sense. Yes. I do remember, and I've got a photo somewhere which I couldn't find. I've got a photo of me and Bill Gates having lunch in London.
Glenn, can you find that? We need that for promotional purposes on the podcast. We need you to get that in.
We were the largest Microsoft distributor in the UK, if probably not Europe. So we were significant to that relationship.
Yeah.
But I have to say they were a hard company to work with. I mean, they saw it as working for, but really it was working with. But they were very, very
domineering,
single-minded, very focused. And the answer was always yes. You had no alternative. You had
the vision may already have been there for world domination in many respects. Probably was. He was already en route to it. I mean, when you're talking about meeting Gates there, I would have thought it's not Windows, is it? I mean, that's MS-DOS days, is it?
Days, yes. I mean, all their product was in boxes. It was all in 3.5-inch floppy drives or discs, and consequently, distribution was absolutely required because you needed a warehouse.
That's right.
Physically big.
So fast forward a bit then from that to because it always kind of amazes me, as I said, there was a time when you needed warehouse infrastructure, huge amounts of racking for all of the equipment and all the software. You eventually ended up We went through Sun Microsystems, which would have been boxes as well, but you ended up with Symantec, where Symantec software, although that was not an antivirus, was often sold
It was.
in box and CD-ROM, but you will also have been there. All of a sudden, it basically becomes software. It's literally downloadable. I mean,
Yes, I mean, physically you don't need a warehouse at all for that world.
and yet a distributor's role was still maintained.
It is, and it does provide a service, and a very good service. And one of the things I did in my career, having left Symantec, was get involved in training distribution organisations, because one of their things they're good at is taking on the responsibility for the financing of it.
Right. It is like a third party. It is like a factoring in some sense, is it?
Well, yes, that's a good way to put it, because you're absolutely right. Because what the manufacturer doesn't want is the responsibility of chasing debt or worrying about getting payment. He just wants to make it available to a distributor and let them deal with it.
Right.
And of course, what they're dealing with is a whole set of parts. Be it a soft cat or a computer center or a Ultima or whoever it happens to be. And distribution plays, still today, I believe, plays a very significant role in that world.
Yes, yeah. But how could you say it's evolved since those early days? How would you say the ecosystem has changed? We are talking about 25 years. Are there any other elements you'd add to it? As I said, not just the change from hardware to software.
So if I, as I mentioned earlier, I did some training for some distribution sales people within a vendor. So vendors have, in their channel world, they have two types of sales people, if you call them. The partner account managers that manage relationships with Softcat and Computer Center, and they have distribution account managers who manage the distributors. One of the things I ended up doing is creating a training program for the distribution account managers to get them to understand finance.
Right. Because
what the distributors didn't like, because I actually went around and interviewed quite a few of them, because of my background and my contacts, I had some credibility. I could get meetings with various senior people, and the feedback I got from the distributors was it would be really good if we had vendor account managers who come to manage our relationship, if they had some understanding of what profit and loss or a balance sheet was.
Yes.
And sadly, when I went and did the training, having created the program to deliver it, it was quite worrying that there was probably 80% of the people who sat in front of me, and I trained quite a number, actually right across the world for this particular vendor. 80% of them couldn't tell you the difference between the balance sheet and a profit and loss.
Yes, yeah.
Which may sound, well, what's that got to do with their life? But when you actually sit down with a distributor and look at how they run their business, they're running it to decimal points, several points beyond the decimal point in terms of margin, because they have to, because it's about getting the most out of your dollar as you can. And if you have
certain accounting methods, you can be profitable, whereas with another accounting method, you could be out of business.
So I remember doing a training program in Florida to a bunch of sales guys from a particular vendor. I won't name who they were, but the South Americans really got it. And it was a 3-day course I put together. A lot of interaction, a lot of involvement, a lot of homework, all that good stuff. And they went away, and quite a few of them used to call me up at odd hours of the day to ask further questions. And their relationship with their distributors in South America went up, 10 times, 20 times.
Yes.
Because they were having the right conversation.
Similarly, I was at Computer Center for a short period of time in the early 90s, and it didn't kind of work for me there. And I look back at it, and the reason why is I did not have the P&L mindset, because even back Computer Center very, very effectively based their commission structure all on margin, and you were basically, you had to manage all of the costs that you incurred as a salesperson. You had to pay the sales support that you had working for you. You had to fund that person. So if you and if you had technical pre-sales come into a meeting room where you're delivering a presentation to a customer, I had to pay for the meeting room. I had to pay for the pre-sales or the sales support people to be there. So you had to have much more business acumen, not just, as I said, the typical perhaps sales capabilities of rapport building and maybe persuasion and relationship building, but the business acumen side was critical, and I think I didn't quite see it because I'd never required it to that extent before. Now, I think kind of this moves us quite nicely into your MBA studies, doesn't it? Because my guess is, as I said, maybe a light must have gone on for you at some point in your career, where because you wouldn't have known what a P&L or a balance sheet would have been in your early days either. But you did at some point. Do you want to tell the listeners something about your MBA experience?
One of the interesting parts of the P&P time was working for a guy who was an ex-consultant from one of the big five that were around at the time. And clearly he'd been well educated and well trained, and you started to realise that he knew an awful lot, and all the other directors around him who were good at what they didn't have the breadth of understanding about the bigger picture. And I always thought at the time, I wish I knew more than I do know, and an MBA would be good. And it took me some years to get round to doing it. So it was mid-90s that I decided that I was going to do it. It was a decision made by not only me, but my wife and two sons, because it was going to affect them as well. Because what it involved is me going to, at the time, it was Surrey University. It was an up-and-coming European management school. And
for an up-and-coming European manager, perfect fit.
And we went, it would involve going, I think it took 2 years in total, and it involved 4 weekends every year, but clearly lots of homework and studying, and then a dissertation at the end, which was 30,000 words and goodness knows what else. And we decided I was going to do it, self-funded, and off I went. And I just loved it. Because what it started to do is to flesh out all those sort of experiences I'd sort of had or been involved in the past, and this was a chance to actually put some credibility around it. But what I found interesting, and I think the university started to understand, was when you invite people of my age, I was sort of mid-40s, and there were people older than me, younger than me, all working, all had careers of some shape or form, all in different walks of life, but they were now lecturing to people with experience. And what they were starting to get was the reality of, well, that would never work. The theory might be good. It might be someone's theory that's come out of Harvard or wherever, MIT, and but how would that work in real life? And what they got exposed to as lecturers was people actually pushing back, because we weren't students, we were adults, and we were saying, yes, but. And that actually helped our education, because we were getting different discussions were being had. Certain schools.
The to and fro, I think, you know what I mean? It kind of strengthens it in many respects. So,
and it was helped by the fact that you've got, it all wasn't one industry. There were people. I remember there was a young lady who was from Pret that was just started in those days, and they were she was the accountant for Pret. And there was various other people from different organisations, and we all had different angles on the world. I was IT and etc. Anyway, it came to an end. I remember having a holiday in Cornwall with the family. Every morning I was upstairs in the property we'd hired, doing my dissertation, for a fortnight. And in the afternoon, I would go out with the boys and go to the beach, and we'd do stuff. So my family, made a big commitment to it as well. And eventually, the exams come along. I passed, and I ended up going and putting a civvy hat on and getting an MBA.
Well done.
And I would have gone straight back and done a PhD if the world had allowed me to, in the sense that I'd got buckets of money and I could have done it. It's not the world of academia that I appreciate. It was the interest in researching and diving into subjects in much more depth. I found fascinating, and I would have loved to have done that.
Said said it was the research element. My guess is that in comparison to back out into the real world of business, where it's just basically you've got to keep churning that cookie cutter in some respects, not necessarily try and work out. Although whilst you're doing it, you've got to try and find, is there a better way to make this cookie cutter to kind of optimize it. But I can see the appreciation that you had there. But you've said to me before, you think that was and if you'd have had your time again, you'd have done an MBA earlier. You think that was a transformative experience for you?
I have no regrets in the world I lived in terms of industry and what I ended up doing. But if I could turn the clock back, absolutely, I would have done that in my early 30s, maybe even late 20s. But frankly, early 30s is much better. You've got some experience of the world before you step into the world.
And there would have been a significant accounting module on that as well, I would have thought.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Which again, as you said, you've then taken back out into the industry, and you can see that is somewhere where there's perhaps the industry or the business hasn't quite optimized yet within the whole channel ecosystem there. Let's just kind of pivot a little, if I can, at that point. I think we all understand the advantages of working through the channel, scale, access to markets and customers. Given your exposure and experience of it, as a counterpoint, what do you think are the downsides? What are the risks, the challenges, and the within those relationships, vendor, disti, reseller, MSP, partner? What would you say are the challenges today?
For me, it comes down to recognizing that that route to market, the vendor, the distributors, the partners, the end user, there has to be an element, I think, of trust.
Right.
People have to recognize that everyone has a part to play, and they should appreciate that part and work with it. What I saw in my tenure was people trying to go round it, find ways of avoiding it. I do remember having meetings with Michael Dell, trying to convince him that going via a distributor would be a much better route for him certainly in Europe.
Because they were a vendor direct to users, weren't they?
Yeah, and he did something we all think would never work. I mean, we were all going, why would you want to do that? But he made it work. Now, what we don't know, mainly because I never asked, but what I don't know is whether financially was that the right thing for him to do, because it's a big investment for a vendor to actually create a warehouse, people to stock it, systems to run it, physically pick it up, pack it, ship it, and all those things, and then get the money back for it or chase debts. And there's what a distributor does, is quite significant. So for me, the industry needs to, I don't think the model's broken. I don't think the model, in my opinion, will ever change. It just needs everyone to respect each other's position in it and work with it and try and understand each other's perspectives. And I go back to that training for the guys around understanding finance. That was just one aspect of, if you understand what your customer, because I'm a distributor salesman, if I understand their business much better, I'm going to have a better relationship. I'm not going to say that demand they do certain things for a very low margin, because why would they? I've got to find a better way to pitch that and find a better way for them to understand how they can make money, because that's the world they live in.
And go back to the Dell. My guess is, I think Michael Dell effectively did come to your point of view over a period of time, because they did transition They were, as you said, independent and operated to a completely different model. It's how they built the business, I think, and got to a certain level. I don't know who stores and ships Dell equipment because they're still very equipment oriented. I don't know who does that now, but they do work hand in hand with the channel, and so clearly, bit by bit by bit. As I said, in those early days, it was all up in the air, but slowly but surely, with the profit motive in mind, people eventually realized this is a better way of operating, a better way these relationships work, and bit by bit by bit, it established what I can see now as as they say, the traditional or standard routes to market as they are today. Now, look, we're running out of time here. I've got a couple of rapid fire questions that I'm going to throw at you here. Say, best sales culture you've ever experienced?
Ooh, now that is a toss-up between Sun Microsystems and Rapid Recall.
Right. Okay. And why?
You're going to force. Okay. Well, why? If you're going to force me to make a decision, I guess Sun.
Right.
And why? Because there was a vendor that did the right things at the right time, had the right culture, and the world needed it. Its product, its hardware and its software, which was Solaris, and everyone was demanding it.
So you're selling £10 notes for £8.50 at this time, and business is good.
Absolutely. And that world creates a culture of success, and success breeds success, and everyone just got on that bandwagon, and it was wonderful.
As you say, yes. The winner's circle was enlarged with so many people in the winner's circle. Momentum kicks in.
Killed it, sadly, and it disappeared into Oracle, and there are still people on, Facebook having Sun reunions, etc. Yeah, very sad.
And have you got a moment in time where you would say which was your most memorable or the most exciting moment from your working career? Can you look back and from that pull out one nugget, just whether it was an end of month, end of quarter, end of year, I'm just interested in one memorable moment from your career. What comes to mind? So many to choose from.
We haven't got onto the fact that I left Symantec back in 2012, so it's 12 years ago, and set up my own business, and ended up going back and basically taking my experience and giving it to other people. And for me, that was so much fun. I mean, and
that's wonderful.
That's what you do as well, and it's so much fun because you've not got the responsibility and accountability per se, but you're sharing your knowledge and your experiences with other people, and more often than not, seeing it make a difference.
Independence makes a difference, doesn't it? You know what I mean? As I said, I wouldn't say when you work for a company, you feel totally constrained. It doesn't feel like a straitjacket, but in some sense, you have to toe the company line in what is said and what is done. Yeah. Whereas independently, you're able to step outside of that, and that's a pretty freeing experience too.
And what I also found is that you end up having a deeper relationship with the companies that you used to deal with in a previous life. When you go in as a consultant, they sort of open up the kimono and you get into a much deeper relationship because they're quite happy to do it now because you're there to help them. And you had a strong bond anyway because that's why they've invited you in, because they respected you, and you just further deepen that relationship, which I found great. And sadly, COVID came along and stopped all that, but hey.
Well, we're coming out of it the other end, and I got to thank you for your time with us here today. I've also got to thank you because your use of the phrase "open the kimono" it means I can check off my buzzword bingo checklist here. We're only 2 episodes into the Channel Zone podcast, but open the kimono. That's it. House.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
Brilliant. I look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future, Glenn. All the best.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, thanks for watching, or thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed our interview, our chat with Glenn Graham. Like, subscribe, hit those buttons, and come join us again sometime soon. Until then, all the best.